And of course, energy has been one of the biggest gainers over the last month, right? As we just talked about, getting up to $93. Joining me right now, Tucker Perkins, President and CEO, Propane Education and Research Council. Thank you so much for being with us. So, your thoughts on what's going on here, because is it getting a little toppy? That's what one of our last guests said. Maybe oil won't run to 100 so quickly.
I think for sure, short term, it is getting toppy, and most of the technical traders, I think, are already starting to talk about pulling back. Now, I watch more of the fundamentals, and I think nothing has changed too much since I was here with you before. Again, the supply is relatively fixed. It's all about the demand. When the demand runs up a bit, then the trade runs up and the price moves up. We're kind of seeing right now a pullback in demand. And so we couldn't imagine hearing talk of $100 crude 4 months ago.
Right.
But you see us move through 90s, and at least now a lot of the technical guys will be talking about 90 as the new floor. So we'll see if it holds.
So let's break it down, because nat gas inventory seems to be somewhat normal, but gasoline and diesel low.
So this is the time of year when inventory is very important to me, particularly as we think about the U.S. And so that's the first thing I look at. Where last year much different. Right now, natural gas inventory relatively high towards the top of the 5-year range. Propane inventory sitting really above the 5-year range. So I would say last year, remember, we were thinking about how are we going to get all this natural gas to Europe. Natural gas seems to have their storage full. So as we go ready into the winter, we see great things for natural gas and propane, both relatively inexpensive compared to crude, and probably poised to stay that way. It's quite different for gasoline and diesel, both of them on the bottom of their 5-year averages for inventories. And if you even take that basket of crude oil, gasoline, diesel, still relatively low in supply.
I want to get to questions about tech and innovation and moving this forward, but I am a little concerned about the strategic petroleum reserves. We really dug into those and have not replenished. Is that okay, or do we need to do that sooner than later? I mean, the costs are higher now. What needs to happen, or what could happen?
I think it is quite reasonable to believe that we won't think about refilling it when we're at $90. We didn't refill it when it was at $70.
Yeah.
So certainly we have to refill it. I'm sure plans are being made to think about how to refill it, but clearly this isn't the right time. And we'll all see what the winter brings for us in terms of demand. That forecast of El Nino coming, so many variables in play, but we do need to think about refilling that SPR sooner rather than later.
Tell me about, you said Marathon and other major manufacturers are increasing production of renewable propane because the buyers want it. So I like that there's a specific story with a company, with Marathon. Tell me some of the trends you're seeing, or maybe some of the specific companies, things they're doing that seem to be in the right direction in your opinion.
And I'm here, this is Climate Week, it kind of coincides with the opening of the UN. So you're really in the conversation about, where are we thinking, how is energy going to change to fit the climate crisis that we're in? I think Marathon is a perfect example. So committed to traditional oil and gas, perhaps lubricants, but they saw the vision. We need to move to renewable fuels. We need to move to renewable diesel, sustainable jet, renewable propane. And when they start coming into the market, they come in a big way. So we're really happy to see these new supplies of renewable fuels that are zero carbon, sometimes negative carbon. Yeah. So drop-in fuels, you use it just like you use your gasoline or diesel or propane, but zero carbon. And that really is the wave of the future.
Yeah, and what's interesting, Cortera Energy, for example, we just had a guest on earlier today, Bob Yager from Mizuho, who said, buy that one, when he thinks about nat gas, or, maybe the XLE was a little overdone when you look at those energy stocks. Any thoughts on where people could put money to work, whether it's a particular sector within these commodities that we're talking about?
Well, we look at utilities in general. Utilities haven't been a great space for a while. But as you think about the conversation here in New York, and really on a global basis, the conversation has been, it's all about renewable power, almost exclusively electricity. And I see that conversation changing. Certainly natural gas liquids like propane, they're here to stay for a long time. I think you can take great comfort. And even consumers of natural gas and propane can take great comfort when they see the likes of Marathon or Global Clean Energy Holdings moving to these zero carbon renewable fuels, that you can decide to use natural gas, propane today. 15 years from now, you'll have an environmentally friendly fuel.
I'm plugging in. Go ahead.
I've always liked for a long time that natural gas space, and companies that make natural gas deal with it and then deal with the liquids.
Tell me about Occidental Petroleum, because you said that this is one of the names that's an innovator with some unique solutions. And, when we heard Warren Buffett was heavily invested, it really ran up. It has since pulled back some. The low is $55. Right now it's at $65. But
well, I like to watch Occidental because if nothing beyond the traditional oil and gas, Occidental has really taken this lead in direct air capture, and it's direct air capture of carbon. So going in and just finding ways to remove carbon from the air, and as a climate scientist would say, that's something we've got to figure out if we're really going to address climate change. It's not just about removing it before we burn it. It's about getting it out of the air. Occidental is really taking the lead in the U.S. on direct air capture. They're working with the government. They just got a nice chunk of money from the Department of Energy and it's a good example where big scale energy is thinking about solving problems on a big scale.
Yeah.
And I don't want to ever bet against Occidental. I think, as you said, Buffett's made a lot of great moves. There are skeptics to direct air capture, but I think if it's going to be successful, and we're in the early days no matter what, but I think Occidental is going to prove it can be done. Yeah,
and I see a buy rating here from Mizuho just this week with a buy rating and a $76 target, which is right around its highs that it hit back in November, just to add a little something for investors. Thank you so much, Tucker. It's great to see you. Always glad that you're here. Have a good time with the New York Climate Week. I know it's UN week overall, and there's a lot of very influential movers and shakers here this week. Thank you. A lot of nice conversations about marrying finance and the climate. Really interesting day. Thanks for having me. Tucker Perkins, Propane Education and Research Council. Thank you.